Hello, everyone. Today we have a very important and interesting episode of the Startup Society's Foundation podcast. Today we are joined by Bashar Masri, founder of Rawabi City, which is a $1.5 billion new city project in Palestine. Bashar, it's a great pleasure to have you on the show.
Thank you very much. Pleasure is mine.
Of course. And for our listeners who are not familiar with the project, just a basic overview. What is Rawabi and why is it important?
Rawabi is a new city that was established the idea was conceived about 10 years ago. Its main goal is to serve the new generation, the middle income and low income Palestinians living in the West Bank. And the city has progressed, and now it has its first residents in and became quite a destination for Palestinians.
It sounds like from the mission statement of Rawabi that it's not merely for economic development of a particular class, but it is to strengthen the state of Palestine. How do you see that this development is leading to that goal?
Absolutely. I'm a strong believer that we have a state in the making, and in order to have a strong state, you have to have different pillars: good governance, excellent human and civil rights, and of course, strong economy and high standards of living. Rawabi is focusing on that part as the main issue, but of course, by building a new city, you need to focus on many aspects of life that we would like to have in a new modern state, like a secular state, like a democratic state. So Rawabi is a secular city. It has a municipality, elected municipality. So that's democracy. Has homeowners associations where people are elected to each neighborhoods. That's practicing democracy at the grassroots. It's a relatively large project with a multi-benefit, of course.
Well, obviously, this is a project of a grand scale that requires countless stakeholders and resources. How did your journey begin?
Well, it began about 10 years ago when I came up with the idea and gathered my senior team together to discuss the possible obstacles to a project like this. And around a conference table with about 30 people, we counted 102 obstacles, ranging from political to commercial to finance to civil. And at the end of the meeting, I told them, guys, let's call them challenges and move on. And we did. And we started nailing the challenges one by one. And here we are today, doing quite well, I think, with very few challenges left ahead of us from the 102 challenges we counted. Obviously, along the way, we have had several other challenges.
Could I ask a question about one of them? One of the biggest challenges that I see when researching this project is infrastructural. Palestine, for our listeners who are not familiar, it's segmented into regions, a Part A and a Part B. Part A controlled entirely by Palestine, and Part B is a joint leadership by Israel and Palestine. Unfortunately, the infrastructure necessary for the project goes through Part B, and there is some difficulty negotiating with the state of Israel for control of that infrastructure. Could you sort of elaborate what happened and what you did to resolve it?
Actually, just to clarify, there's Part A, B, and C. A is controlled by the Palestinian Authority, as you mentioned. B is controlled by civil, the Palestinian Authority, and security Israel. And C, which is the majority of the West Bank, about 65% of the West Bank, is all controlled by Israel. And it's not just Israel, is the terrible arm of Israel, the occupation. We knew this day one and we wanted to get going. And so that's why we planned the project mainly in Area A, so that all the approvals have to go from the Palestinian Authority, because we knew that it's going to be difficult, super difficult, dealing with the occupation. Normally, it's difficult to deal with the occupation. This is not abnormal. This doesn't mean we accept it. But sure enough, I think if I am to build it in Area C, today I'll be still talking about building it in Area C, because the little infrastructure we had to extend in Area C, such as the water pipeline and the access road, proved to be hell to get. It was very, very difficult to obtain. any new project, any new city project, and there has not been a whole lot of city projects, but any new city project faces a lot of challenges and obstacles. Building in Palestine under or surrounded by occupation adds a challenge that is equal and more to all the other challenges.
One of the things that this podcast does is try to extract best practices so other projects can go and be successful. What are some general approaches that you would recommend to our listeners when they're trying to negotiate with not necessarily a host state in this case, but a host state in many of the cases of our listeners, how to deal with infrastructure in existing institutions?
Well, first of all, for a project like this, you must prepare yourself and have a thick skin before you start. Because if you don't, it's easy to give up. You have to be totally determined because there's a lot of downs. And if you let those downs take you away from your goal, you're doomed. So there were many moments where I felt awful, but immediately snapped and moved on to get the project going. There are a lot of illogical things also that happens. There's a lot of unexpected things that happen, of course. But the most important thing is determination in a project like this. Another thing I would say, and you use the right word, best practices. We're not inventing anything in this project. The world has tested many things. There are thousands and tens of thousands of cities out there. All we have to do is learn bits and pieces from each one of best practices, try to adopt them to our local situation and implement them if we can afford to.
So speaking of best practices, when you made the city, obviously there were some principles of urban planning and maybe even governance that were associated with it. What are some best practices that you extracted from new city projects around the world or special zone projects around the world that you implemented here in Rawabi?
Well, first of all, planning. The word planning itself, of course, is very important. There are a lot of cities in the world that just pop out without much planning. Planning with the environment. Any construction encourages on the environment. You build a wall around your house, you're fooling around with the environment. Our presence as human beings, unfortunately, as a must, infringes on the environment. It's how to minimize that. And that's very important. So we decided in the planning not to build the city in the valleys where it's land used for agriculture. We planned it on top of the hill, which makes it very tough construction-wise, but at least we're utilizing land that is not as useful as the other land. We also did not want to do big highways, rather because we have to do a lot of excavation, rather than respect the mountain and do narrow roads, more narrow roads. Like for every wide road, we would do 2 narrow roads, which makes the whole place looks much better and gives people nice views. There are a lot of other things like little things and big things that we had to deal with. Most important, of course, you need to address the people. This is about the people. This is about the inhabitants. No matter how much you build, it's solid. It's the souls that live in the project, which makes the project going. And we need to build for those souls to meet their needs and their demands and their comfortable life.
So planning obviously is very important, especially for very basic infrastructure. But as a planner, you have to balance the idea that a city is not this static organism. It's organic. It has the life of its own, especially if it's a market-driven city like Rawabi. It's going to have businesses and developments of its own that aren't going to come from the central plan. How do you make that balance to have market-driven forces, but at the same time account for the environment or account for proper and effective planning?
No, I would say you always have to keep the environment in mind, because if you do not, and if you don't put environment ahead, it's easy to forget and ruin the environment. So in every component of the project, we thought of the environment. Not always we can afford to respect the environment as much as we would like to, but often you can, and often is cheap. And sometimes, like in our case, it's even more economical. It pays back. So for example, we have massive excavation to do in Rawabi, massive excavation. So instead of moving the excavated material to another site and dump it there, what we did is we set up a factory, 2 factories on site, One that takes the big rocks and turn them into stones that we use them to clad the buildings. Second, the little rocks, we crush them and get the base course needed for the building of the roads. And third, the rest of the material, we terraced a ravine, part of the mountain, and built a Roman-style amphitheater and created a large park that has become destination to tens and tens of thousands of people, especially on the weekends and in the evenings, especially in the summer. We hold concerts, etc. It just became a beautiful place for entertainment and for outing. People don't have to pay anything to be there, just a pleasant place. So we created a positive environment out of a problem, and that's very important.
No, it seems that you've done an amazing job. The pictures are amazing. There's been giant concerts there. You've really tried to get the most top of the line restaurants and fashion stores involved. And there's the Q Center, which is the Qatar sponsored center of the town where everyone congregates. What are some of the principles that you apply to make a really vibrant town center?
In our part of the world, one of the most nice things, we are blessed to have beautiful weather. You could be at least 9 months of the year comfortably outdoor. And that's why we created the Q Center on a pedestrian base outdoor. And pedestrian is very important because it encourages people, no vehicles inside, and it encourages people to walk. It's cleaner. It's really a very pleasant, at least I believe it's very pleasant. We also wanted to bring part of our culture, an important part of our culture. The looks of the old cities we have, old Jerusalem, old Nablus, old Hebron, most of the villages, alleys, little shops, etc., rather than just imitate the West with big shopping center. Well, we do have from the West the shopping stores, but in a Middle Eastern, I would even go further, in a very Palestinian fashion. On top of that, however, we built a modern, state-of-the-art technology park, that buildings that would attract the technology companies of the world, or at least that's what we're aiming at. So it's comfortable space, a great IT infrastructure, and we're hoping to create the first tech hub in Palestine at the Rawabi Q Center.
It's very interesting. It seems that the economic driver in this drive towards tech, it's one of the pinnacles. As you call it, it's the Marshall Plan of Palestine. But one thing that we at the Startup Societies Foundation look at when we're looking at new city projects, it's not merely an infrastructure project. There's plenty of smart cities in smart infrastructure, but that alone is not the key ingredient that leads to economic growth. If there isn't a policy background, a solid policy framework, if there isn't stability that leads to economic growth, has Rawabi considered installing some sort of competitive legal or policy framework that would attract businesses there outside of simply beautiful infrastructure and prime location?
We would love to, but we're not the decision maker in this. We're not the government.
Right.
Keep in mind, Rawabi is a private sector-led project. As a matter of fact, to my knowledge, it's the first public city in the history of the world that is planned, designed, financed, constructed, maintained by the private sector. I'm not aware of any other story like Rawabi anywhere else in the world. That makes it a little bit tougher, of course, but it makes it more fun, and it makes the decision making a much easier and faster process. So we could not lure the international companies by tax incentives, special tax incentives, because whatever tax incentives the Palestinian Authority gives, they give for every other city, not just for all the cities and villages, not just for Rawabi. So what we could attract them with is the cluster of human resources, the cluster of intelligent people, of educated people, people who, in addition to speak Arabic, they speak English, people who are highly motivated, people who want the future. They are here because they see the city as the positive future, and that's very important. And we're hoping this will work. It is working, but it still needs a little bit to go.
Interesting. Yeah, no, it's absolutely necessary to have an agglomeration effect where if you have a hub, it attracts more people, with high human capital. But the question is, how do you get that initial cluster? Are you relying mostly on the psychological effect that this is something very new, this is something that's revolutionary in Palestine, and this infrastructure is so beautiful? Or is it sort of the investment that you're bringing in, or the type of infrastructure that would be that beginning impetus to start the hub?
No, I think what we need to do is marketing. I think we already have a sellable concept, sustainable, profitable for companies that would come here. We just need to market it, because the problem in Palestine is it's perceived that bullets are flying all over the place. That is not the case, of course. We do have issues, but they don't know that the chance of being hurt in most cities of the world from criminal issues is probably higher than being hurt in Palestine from both criminal and political issues. So we're not trying to avoid or claim that we don't have issues. We do have issues, and that's why we're focusing on IT rather than industry, because IT does not depend as much on moving goods from one place to the other, which we have a problem with the occupation. So I think we just need to get the right message out, and we are doing that to international companies. We're lucky. International companies are right next door, within half an hour to an hour drive from us. They're all over Israel. All of the Fortune 100 and 500 technology companies are in Israel. Well, maybe not all, but most of them. And they're not there selling phones and computers only. They're there selling research centers, buying companies, design. They're investing tens and tens of billions of dollars next door to us. So we would like to bring them.
Excellent. So if special zone status is out of the question and you're focusing on IT, have you considered taking the examples of Estonia and setting up an e-governance type system where it's really easy to register a business or register property or to register anything in Rawabi and make it sort of a destination as a consequence?
Yeah. First of all, we are working on a smart city program, which should be launched in the next few months. We already have a lot of smart city components, but I'm talking about a specific app on which you could do quite a lot of things. And we will link it with later on as a second stage, we'll link it to other government agencies. So you could register, apply, pay, do everything through that app and make it very investor friendly, especially technology investor friendly. One of the greatest things we have is we're not a bureaucratic nation. We're a nation in the making, which makes things easier because there is no precedence that we have to stick to. Everything is new, and we do have a cooperative government body for most of the time that we could deal with, and they're like my neighbor, my cousin, my classmate, etc. So I believe this will be easy to do in the future. We have not done that yet.
Excellent. But unlike most government projects, this one plans to make a profit. At least it seems like it. There's two major investment firms, your firm, Masar International, I believe, and the Qatar Investment Authority. I'm curious to ask, what sort of is the business model there? I mean, obviously there's a lot of money investment. Is it on the back end because of you? This is another interesting thing. Rawabi introduced mortgages for the first time in Palestine. Is Rawabi receiving a share of the mortgages, or are they simply just receiving a payment from the Qatar fund?
No, Rawabi is nothing to do with the mortgages. The mortgages go to the buyers directly from the banks. And it was a project like Rawabi that caused the mortgage system to happen in the scale we see it today in Palestine. You can get a mortgage for 25 years with reasonable interest rates, very close to most of the Western world, basically. And with a down payment that could go as low as 10%. So we benefit from it because it creates the euphoria in buying, but we do not have a direct benefit from the mortgage system at all, actually. It's very important to point out that Rawabi, although we are a for-profit company, Rawabi is a developmental project. Mm-hmm. We don't expect to make money. And what's the difference in my book between developmental and philanthropy? Philanthropy is when you take your money and contribute it to somebody else and they use it to the cause they're at. This is very good, noble. But developmental is when you oversee your funds and you make the benefit last for 10 or 20 years. And at the end of the 20 years, you get all your money back, most of it, half of it. Maybe you lose it because there's such a risk in the project, and maybe you'll make a little money. At this point, with the issues we had with Rawabi, such as the water delay, the road delay, etc., we expect to lose a part of the money. We will not make any money. But both partners, myself and the Qataris, maybe for different reasons. For me, this is part of building my state. So the contribution is well worth it. And for the Qataris, it appears that their motivation is to support the Palestinian people in building their state and to support a sustainable economy. And they're certainly getting that back.
Of course. And obviously, we don't necessarily expect huge returns or any returns. You might even lose money. But do you believe this type of development project is more effective than, let's say, a purely public project?
I think this is a very effective way of investing our funds, or anyone else's funds for that matter. I am into building a strong state, not a welfare state. Mm-hmm. So if we make the money as a contribution, most likely that money would have been utilized by now, maybe for good causes, but not sustainable causes and not for a long time. The important issue in what we did is what will happen next. You see, my vision for Rawabi is not Rawabi, but rather the domino effect that Rawabi will create. So you see Rawabi 2, 3, 4, and 5 in the next 10 years. And not by me, maybe by somebody else, hopefully by somebody else. Rawabi had already taken the biggest burden. And the relative losses we have, the losses we have in Rawabi, future projects should not see that, and they should see profits. And I think second Rawabi and third Rawabi and fourth and so on will be profit-making projects.
Yes, there are a couple of organizations that are trying to make truly private cities and try to make a return off of it. It might be difficult for the first iterations, like you said, because of you're just getting the model started. But as best practices evolve, profit will become more and more steady as standardization happens. So there's another element to Rawabi, or at least until your efforts. And I'm wondering if this is a more profit-seeking venture or this is also purely social impact. It's the Suraj Fund, and it invests in startups, about a $90 million worth of assets in the fund. What is sort of the mission behind that fund?
Well, first of all, I have to make money somehow, so it's definitely for profit, only for profit. So the mission behind that is our funds are not sufficient. We need to gang up a lot of other money, foreign investment to come to Palestine. Building a nation will require billions and billions of dollars. And so we decided to launch a private equity fund. It was the first private equity fund dedicated to Palestine ever. It's a modest fund. The first fund was only $90 million, and we're about to raise another fund now, which will be also $100 million. And it invests in different projects in Palestine. It doesn't have to be Palestinian companies, but the project that we invest in, the amount we invest in, must be equal to the amount of work that is in Palestine. We aim to bring the investors returns with IRRs of 10 to 20%. And at the same time, of course, have a lot of social impact by job creation, helping a lot of family companies to grow. A lot of family companies do not want investors to come in and stay forever. They like the private equity because we come in, we put funds with them. After a while, we exit. We exit with a profit, but that means they have a lot of profit as well. So Suraj is, if you wish, in the early stages, and I hope to see in the future many other funds with a lot more money invested in Palestine.
Obviously, there's a very big startup ecosystem in Israel as well, especially in Tel Aviv. Are you trying to make that startup system, separate or completely siloed away from the Israeli ecosystem? Or are you interested in seeing collaborations between the two?
I'm a believer that our destiny is together. We are here to stay, and they are here to stay. We have had many years of animosities, and there was a lot of unfairness. We certainly are victims to this whole situation, but there are so many victims all over the world, and we need to move on and make the best out of it to build our nation, and to build our economy, to build our government, to build our civil society. And there is nothing wrong with turning the animosity into a win-win situation moving forward. The fact that we do have next door to us, within half an hour to an hour drive, a vibrant economy, who's who of the Fortune 100 and 500 are next door to us, something we should capitalize on, especially since Israel now has a shortage of technology people, mid-level technology people, and we have a total wonderful surplus of the same thing they have a shortage of. This is a great win-win situation, and I intend to capitalize on it, definitely.
Excellent. But interestingly enough, on this project, it's actually controversial on both sides of this issue. I mean, obviously, Israeli settlers, they're upset that there's a very, well, some call the first Palestinian settlement is happening right next to their door. But also on the Palestinian side, some aren't favorable of it because they say that it's normalizing the state of affairs. It's not trying to fight against it. It's trying to, try to make an example whilst the occupation or whilst the relationship that Israel and Palestine have with each other exists.
Yeah. So as far as the Israeli settlements, this is an ideological movement designed to uproot us from our land. And so by its definition, the settlement is a cancer threatening our day-to-day lives, and it will continue to do that. And it's unfortunate that the international community is mixing the boycotting of Israel with the boycotting of the settlements, and are forgetting that the settlements are illegal, and most countries recognize them as illegal. By the way, even the United States until recently. I'm not sure if they officially changed their position. They saw them as illegal, then as an obstacle to peace. Now we find the US ambassador speaking as if it's a good thing to be a settler. It's an evil thing to be a settler. The settlements are a disaster. And if the settlers are criticizing me, and I know they are, they're attacking us, I am not offended at all. I'll be offended if they thought we are good to them. Something is wrong. Now, as far as Palestinians who criticize the project for the so-called normalization, well, maybe we are. So what? Are we normalizers? All the Palestinian community is normalizer. All of us use Israeli products. All of us use Israeli electricity today. All of us. There is no Palestinian electricity in the West Bank today. 100% of our electricity comes from Israel. Does that mean we're normalizers? Yes, it does. They argue, no, you're not, because there's no alternatives. Say, damn right there is, and it's called alternative energy, and it's also good for the environment, if you like. So the issue is, again, we're here to stay, they're here to stay, and we need to make the best out of it. I have been criticized, as you mentioned, on few issues by both radicals at the same time. And this is when I know I'm doing the right thing.
No, I mean, usually if both sides of an issue are angry at you, you might be doing something right. You might be finding the middle path. It's interesting what you said about energy independence. Do you believe that these new city projects would lead to more independence or dependence upon your neighbors? Because obviously there's economic interdependence, but at the same time you have your own economic resources.
No, more independent for sure. But independent and cooperation, the West Bank has been totally economically dependent on Israel since 1967. Totally, fully. They control our borders, they control our funds, they control everything. So building the city and having a vibrant economy from within will make us less dependent, but it will put us at a level where we cooperate with them on an equal level, rather than our market being a dumping market for their products. So by hiring an IT person for an international company, I'm exporting services. rather than just consuming products and importing. So I think it's very important to change the formula.
So again, we keep going back to this, but this is the key problem. How do you attract outside industries or capital that are afraid about the stability of the region or the economic and political feasibility of doing business there?
First, you don't attract all of them. That's fact. If we attract a fraction of them, boy, that's wonderful. And there are so many people out there that want to be part of this. It's not only Bashar Masri that has a unique opportunity of building a model state. It is all the Palestinian people and the world. And ironically, they have the chance of building a model state in an area surrounded by disasters right now where everything is collapsing. Syria, Iraq, Libya, Yemen, so many countries are collapsing, so many problems. This is a peak of hope. This is terrific, and there's so many good people out there. This project taught me one thing, that there are so many wonderful people out there ready to help. So many people came out to us. So many people will hear me talking now and will approach me and say, hey, I'm a solar energy expert. How can I help? I am a technology company. I would like to help creating jobs. I am an architect and I like to do this and that. It is just wonderful. It's overwhelming. And it's coming from people we never expect that they would be so friendly and so supportive to the Palestinian people.
I think you're hitting the nail on the head. It seems that there might be a new wave or a new method of international relations, less the sort of American style of militaries and more about building infrastructure, economic development projects. Do you see what you're doing here could be a method for minority populations and developing states from around the world?
Yes, absolutely. I believe the Rawabi model, and it doesn't have to be exact, it could be changed to a local situation, should be studied for other places that have issues. You know, it can't be like ours, but probably similar in one way or the other. It's a way to pick up a troubled place and move it to a much higher level, motivate the people, and create a sustainability for them.
Excellent. So I know your number one concern is to the people of Palestine, the place where you were from. But if this project takes to the full level that you anticipate it to be, would you be interested in using this template personally elsewhere in the world, or advising on projects or investing in projects that use similar models?
It's true that my interest is Palestine, and I think everyone's interest should be helping and working with their neighborhood first before they go somewhere else. And as they do that, they should take that know-how to the rest of the world. The world is a small place, it's not a big place. This issue of nations is something human created, in my opinion. Although I am nationalistic myself, I don't understand it, it's stupid, but I am too. And I'm part of that stupidity as well. Now that Rawabi is on its way to success, we're already getting a lot of interest from other countries, and we are sharing the experience. When we planned Rawabi, we went around and looked at best practices. And today, I'm so happy that other places are looking at Rawabi for best practices and asking our advice, advise them, tell them how we solved a certain problem. And just like we got help out of nowhere, we're here to help anyone that we can help.
That's an interesting point, because it talks about a delicate balance that has to be struck. With a lot of these projects, there are people who aren't from the local population that are helping or investing or managing the project. And that is sometimes very helpful, but a lot of times the locals they're very perplexed why there's this outside group helping. But there's many people who came out to you, especially people talking about with solar farms, that they want to help you, and according to you, they seem very genuine. How do you strike a good balance of trying to help out populations in another place while at the same time respecting them as leaders in the locale and making sure that they are the leaders of any development project that happens?
I think it has to do with the helper and how, when they go in a place that needs help, how to deal with that delicate situation. If you come with the internationals went back home, they're not here to stay. They shouldn't be here to stay. They went back to their homes and left the know-how with the Palestinians. And now we developed the know-how that we can take it to other needy places and hopefully do the same. So I think for the people in need, they should be more flexible and get the help, no matter what the intention is. Well, to a certain extent, of course, but with the bigger weight is on the people giving the help, to empower the local people, to give them the respect, to train them, and pull out and just remain as advisor or go back as a visitor. You'll feel very comfortable. You'll sleep very comfortable at night if you do that.
Excellent. So it's not just advisors that there's this tension between foreign and local. It's with residents as well. Some communities, they simply want their national identity represented. Some people want a cosmopolitan feel. What is the balance that you're striking here with Rawabi, and how?
You have to have a balance, and no matter what you do, you'll be criticized by one side or the other.
Mm-hmm.
And I think you should expect that. But the most important is to focus on the majority. You can never ever please everybody.
Yeah.
And somebody came into Rawabi and said, "Oh gosh, Rawabi, I don't like Rawabi. It doesn't look like Palestinian architecture." And I'm like, "Oh, you're right. Maybe you're right. What is Palestinian architecture? Is it the boxes of Ramallah and Nablus, the buildings that look like Western boxes or some Western boxes? We have them. Is it the arches of Old Jerusalem and Old Nablus and Old Hebron? We have plenty of that. Or is it the Roman theater that's in Sebastia or Caesarea or in Jordan? We have that as well in a modern way. The beauty